And after the war, the CIA is created. The OSS was disbanded, basically. I believe you mentioned in your book that the OSS, in the post-war years, there were two factions. There were those who were actively hunting Nazis and seeking to, break apart these cartels. And then there was this other faction that was trying to undo their work. And out of this comes the CIA. So tell us about the CIA. I mean, from its basic beginnings, its founding, we're talking really a Nazi agency, aren't we?
Very much so. It was written by, the founding documents for the CIA was written by Lovelet. He was very much associated with Prescott Bush, Yale Flying Club. He was also on the targeting committee during the war. He had some input on that part of it. And the first ones in it was this faction from that followed Dulles that was basically sympathetic to the Nazis. With Dulles and Angleton were probably two of the biggest names in the CIA over the next 20 years, and they both were involved pretty heavily with the Nazis. Angleton was one that was involved with the rat lines, and so was Dulles for that matter. But Angleton worked mostly in Italy, where Dulles worked mostly in the Munich region of Germany. And a lot of the agents had worked directly with Dulles, and William Colby was one of them. Or not William Colby, the kind of the OSS under Reagan that died of brain cancer.
Casey, yeah.
It wasn't Colby. I can't remember his name right now.
Yeah, William Casey.
Yeah, Casey. He was one of them that was in the OSS that went with Dulles. It was pretty much a old Nazi club. And
then Eisenhower becomes president. And, tell us about Eisenhower. I mean, he really was enabling a lot of this activity, but at the same time, he gives that speech at the end of his presidency warning about the military-industrial complex. What was Eisenhower up to?
Well, I don't think Eisenhower was a Nazi or a fascist. I think he actually hated the German people pretty much. But I think politically he was naive and he was a dupe. It was John Foster Dulles that convinced him to run for presidency. He convinced him to run by basically overwhelming him with Dulles' view of bombing back to the Stone Age with nukes, so you wouldn't be risking troops. So Dulles actually almost single-handedly picked Eisenhower to be president and appointed himself as Secretary of State. And then, of course, Allen got into the CIA as one of the top leaders of it, director. And there was a lot of other minor officials in the Eisenhower administration that was leaning towards the fascists. I think he finally, I forgot the main one, Tricky Dick.
Yeah. Now that's a really interesting one there. How did Nixon enter the picture?
He started in politics when he was still a naval aide there in Washington. He received some captured Nazi documents, and Allen Dulles went to him and asked him basically to bury him because if the truth came out about those Nazi documents, it would further incriminate Dulles. And the way it was, Dulles was almost tried for treason anyway. And he promised Nixon, he said, if you can bury him, he says, we'll help you with the money for your first congressional political race.
We got a break coming up, and we'll be right back with more from Glen Yeadon, author of The Nazi Hydra in America.
Welcome back, everybody. This is PsiOp Radio, live from Austin, Texas, our 128th episode, and our guest tonight is Glen Yeadon, the author of Nazi Hydra in America, Suppressed History of a Century, and we were just getting into some of the details about Allen Dulles, the head of the CIA and Nazi sympathizer, and all the shenanigans that he was involved with. Glen, Allen's an interesting character also for a whole arena of conspiracy research that's emerged having to do with mind control research. He seems to be one of the main instigating factors behind the infamous CIA MK Ultra programs and the other attendant MK Naomi, MK Delta, Artichoke, and all these other related and sub-projects. But something else that your book chronicles, besides the MK Ultra stuff and the Nazi connections, you give a detail that I am so thankful for. I have been looking for so long for some detail about the origins of the supposed use of the Nazis, the Nazi supposed use of fluoride in the water of concentration camp victims, as well as other populace, to dumb down or to mind control them into some sort of subservitude. And you have a reference in here to a Charles Eliot Perkins, a researcher in chemistry who was sent to Germany to take charge of the vast IG Farben chemical plants, and that he learned about the scheme by IG Farben scientists during the war and adopted by the general staff. Water supplies in certain areas were medicated with sodium fluoride to control the people. Can you tell us a little bit more about Dulles's mind control operation that he started here in the United States?
It almost started immediately with the end of the war, quite frankly. I think the first prereq for what dates back to 47 or 48 for mind control, and then it was worked hand in hand, not only with the physically mind control, but also with the propaganda machine that they was building. It was these programs started out first experimenting with drugs on various prisoners and poor people, and then it was really abuse of the prisoners and the poor, and they would feed them all kinds of various drugs. Of course, there's a famous case of LSD, and the person that jumped out the window out of the New York hotel.
Frank Olson,
Frank
yes.
His last name.
Olson, yeah.
It was basically suicide, but they figured now it was murder. So that happened, and then there was also they got it was BZ was a chemical that they had a lot of faith in.
Mm-hmm.
They probably so much faith that the Army built munitions with BZ, and they probably got enough BZ still stockpiled to flip out the whole world for 2-3 trips.
Wow.
Once they moved on from drugs, they moved into both the occult and child abuse. And they would take very young children and sexually abuse them. So they submit them to occult rituals to control them. In fact, there's several cases that have surfaced. The Finders case in Washington, D.C., where they found these children wandering around the park pretty dirty, and They seized him and they started to investigate him. The two people that were supposed to be watching him, and they stumbled across the whole pedophile ring. There was also the prostitutes. There was youth male prostitutes that was wandering the White House at midnight under the George Bush regime. That's the poppy.
Yeah.
Then there was the Franklin case, which is probably the most well documented. The book was published about it by DeCamp, who happened to be a Republican legislator in the Nebraska Unicam, where they was this guy was King was the name of the guy that headed the ring, and he had the whole pedophile ring, and he'd take different children to Washington D.C., some to all over the country actually, and they would some of these was started as early as 3 years old, and very severe, very much occult rituals. Some of them had to watch children being beheaded, and actually drinking blood from the human sacrifice, and that was all done in the name of mind control.
Now, are you aware of any evidence during the war that would seem as a possible precedent for if that were imported from the Nazis as well?
Oh, some of the Nazi scientists were using drugs for mind control. The Nazis happened to believe that mescaline was the best they could. Actually, Bill Donovan started the very first case of mind control, or if we can call it that. But he thought he was believing that marijuana was the ideal truth serum that he was trying out, and that's what the Nazis used mescaline for too, as a truth serum, basically. And then there was different references, and I haven't been able to pin any of them down, about different occurrences in the Korean War too.
Got another break coming up here. We'll be right back with Glen Yeadon, author of The Nazi Hydra in America.
Stay tuned.